Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Alex Lopez Talks on the Alex Lopez Rocks YouTube channel. Joining me today is the fantastic guitar builder over at ESP Guitars. He's been promoted to operations now, Greg Burnett. Greg, thank you for joining me tonight, man.
Hey, Alex. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful. And you're over in California because that's where ESP does a lot of their builds, their non-Japan builds, right?
Correct. Yeah. So I work in the ESP USA shop, which we're pretty much a production shop with some custom options. We're not really a custom shop, but we give people, the option to be able to choose tops, hardware, things like that. So they do have some, pickup selection, stuff like that.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's really cool. How long have you been with ESP?
I've been with ESP for 7 years.
Wow.
So they brought me on. It was when the shop was first starting. They brought me in, and they really needed some help. And I came in and I started in one spot, and I ended up in another. And I was real happy to be a part of it because I was able to help make some changes to really take the shop to the next level.
That's awesome. Now, is the USA Custom Shop tied to E2?
We're not affiliated with E2 other than, we're an ESP, brand as part of the ESP family.
Yeah.
But as far as what we do, we're specifically ESP manufactured in the USA.
Awesome. That's so cool. Now, what made you get into guitar building? Most people who usually get into guitars are usually guitar players and they kind of find their way there. But what made you got you into the luthier part of it in the building?
I was very, very fortunate because I was a guitar player. I started when I was a kid, always loved guitars, always into guitars. I never knew or even thought about the idea of getting into guitar building. And it was really interesting how it happened. I was a teenager at the time, and my dad happened to mention to one of his buddies, I think it was probably at his church, and a friend of his, he just happened to mention, hey, get my kid a job. I was probably 19 at the time. So he mentions it to the guy, and all of a sudden, I think I'm 20 at that, I didn't think anything of it, but I get a call randomly and asking if I wanted to go work for Jackson Charvel. So they wanted someone entry level with no prior experience. Yeah. And that doesn't happen very often because even me, when I look to hire somebody, I'm looking for someone with a background or at least some sort of training, just because I know that training from the ground up can be very time consuming. Mm-hmm. So I was very fortunate to have an entry level. I think what was happening was they were hiring people who already had previous experience, and those guys were kind of doing things the way they wanted to instead of the way, they weren't adopting the processes.
Kind of set in their ways a little bit. Yeah.
Right. And that was kind of being problematic. So they hired me on. I started from the ground up. I learned, first I came in as doing fret dressing. So I did that for quite a while. Mm-hmm. And learning how to, dress frets and getting really fast at it and really good at it and going from there. And this was back in '94.
Wow. So how long were you with Jackson Charvel before you made the transition over?
I was with Jackson Charvel. I think it was just about 14 years. I want to say, yeah, 14 years. But then I went and did my own stuff. Nothing guitar related, a little bit, but I went and started my own business. I went back to school. I got a business degree in between that time and everything. So it was really, I stepped away from guitars for maybe a couple years, but I couldn't stay out of it very long.
Oh yeah, I got to tell you, even as a musician, anytime that guitar is around and you decide to take a break, you're always going to be drawn back to it. It's a good black hole.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
It sucks you right back in.
It was good for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It was good because in that period, stepping away, it really got me enthused and really super excited about guitars again. When you work at something for a long time, my dad used to do it with, he was a mechanic and he hated working on cars. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, how can you hate working on cars? You love it. You've done it forever. And I think that's what happened. So I kind of got to that point where I understood you get to a point where maybe you just need to take a break and kind of step back for a minute and get back into it, and everything's good again.
That's awesome. Now, what kind of models were you
Yeah.
building when you were at Jackson Charvel?
When I was with Jackson Charvel, we had just brought back, well, product development, A&R, and all that stuff. The corporate guys, they brought back in the San Dimas line.
Nice.
And so 94, 95 ish, we were building bolt-on Charvel style strats. We couldn't do the strat style headstock. We had to do our own, and revision of it, and a couple of revisions of that headstock actually, just because it was infringing on the fit headstock. But so we couldn't do the old school Charvel strat. But so we were doing bodies like that, bolt-on stuff, a lot of customs, because not only was it a USA production shop, but it was also a custom shop as well.
Oh, wow.
So, tons of custom. So, that shop was so small at one point, it got down to maybe 10 or less employees. And I was one of those guys who made the cut after, layoffs and everything. So, that was like, it was the foundation of my building. So I had a chance to really learn from all the guys that had been masters previous, who have already been there for years and years.
That's so cool. Yeah, actually, a fun little fact.
Yeah.
My first guitar that was actually mine was a Green Jackson PS7.
Okay.
So when you're talking about how you had to kind of change the headstock before it went out into production, from it's looking like a Fender headstock.
Right.
My Jackson PS7 had that altered headstock.
Okay.
So when you were pointing it out, it literally just brought me back to my first guitar.
Yeah. So we couldn't do that strat headstock, but then we had another one, and it was slightly different than a typical Fender headstock, strat headstock, and we modified that, and then had to modify it again because they thought it was still too close to their headstock. So there's a couple of those revisions out there. I'm not sure on the value, if it adds any value to some of those, because you can't get them anymore. But a lot of people weren't real fond of that particular headstock necessarily, back in the mid 90s or so.
Yeah. I think I got mine in 2000.
Okay.
It was really cool. It was two single coils and a humbucker in the bridge, or an HHS, or an SSH.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a really cool guitar. I actually a few years ago, I actually with my tech hat removed the original bridge and put in a TB Jones pickup Filtertron, just so it's literally just the volume and the trem on there.
Okay.
Yeah, I love that.
Different sound.
It gives it changes the sound up a whole lot, but that's my baby. So I will never get rid of that guitar just because it's the first electric I ever had.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing. I kind of learned my lesson on that. One of my Jacksons that I did some of the work on it. One of my customs. I ended up selling it, but I had the opportunity to buy it 7 years later, and I bought it back. And
that's awesome.
Best thing I could ever done was get that guitar back. Yeah. It was one of those things where I thought, you're not really playing that much anymore, and this guy really wants it. He'll take care of it. And which he did, and we stayed friends throughout the time, and just meeting him through a Craigslist ad or something like that. And we ended up becoming friends and everything. And he held on to it, and he said, "Hey, if you ever want this guitar back, just let me know." And then finally he said, "Hey, I'm thinking about selling this. Do you want it back?" And so I jumped on the chance to be able to get it back again.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah, so I totally understand keeping your first guitar to go back to that point, and making sure that's your baby,
That's my baby. That's the baby. Absolutely. Everyone always there's usually I've had this guitar my whole life, and to keep it is so sentimental because of that. And then and then sometimes it becomes, even though it wasn't necessarily the greatest guitar you've ever played, it becomes the one that got away because people let it go,
Right. Yeah. Mine, for me, it fit like a glove as soon as I got it back. He did some mods to it. He had the back of the neck stripped, which I was going to do anyway, to natural wood, and like a wax, oiled finish, and it was just It was killer. And when I got it back, it just felt perfect again. Yeah.
Oh, that is awesome. Now, So you transitioned after you left Jackson Charvel. You took a little bit of a break before you went into ESP. What were you doing during that break time?
Yeah. during that break, I actually I actually was going to school, and because I needed a flexible schedule, I also started a auto detailing business, which I'm very proud of. And to this day, I wish I still had that operation, but I had some other opportunities to go work for my ex-boss, who was actually the factory manager of Jackson for, I don't know how many years, or probably over 30 years he worked, I would say. He was one of the original builders back in the original Charvel days.
Oh, wow.
And so he needed some help. I went and worked with him for a little bit, and you know, so I kept myself pretty busy, you know, between going to school and everything. Like I said, I went back and got a couple of degrees and everything, and on top of all that. So I'm pretty proud of that period of my life.
That is so cool. So so after you did this, and so we're like, for example, because detailing and usually like the spray jobs at some I know some car guys and more bikers, they do spray jobs for some guitars too, just because it's a similar process.
Yeah, I was doing I left the paint and body work. I actually had a paint and body work experience prior to that, some, you know, training and everything. So that's kind of what got my foot in the door with Jackson Charvel, to go back to that point.
Oh, nice.
But as far as what I was doing, I had like a mobile wash service basically. And so I was like doing interiors and, you know, buffing and polishing and everything like that. So I would do a lot of, you know, I had some opportunities to do some show cars, and everything was turned out incredible. And
that's so cool.
It was pretty much it like that. So so there's guys that would blow me away. I mean, there's one guy I follow on Instagram and had a chance to kind of, you know, have some conversation with and everything. And he's just incredible, his level of detail and work.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So I was doing that during that period. And
cool. So, so after you did that, you went back into the guitar world, and you ended up at ESP. What were you doing when you first got into ESP?
When I first got in ESP, it kind of started, the shop was really strange, because everybody was kind of bouncing around and doing different things. And my background in production, because I was also, you know, I was also like a department supervisor and everything. I was pretty active in my role with kind of helping to manage production and manage quality throughout production. So what I saw was happening was, when I first started with ESP, and the background of the guys who were there at the time, they were more like boutique builders and one-off builders, to where they would take a guitar from the beginning and take it all the way through. But I found that trying to set up for production and increase output, you really have to kind of standardize everything, standardize all your processes, get your guys in line. Let those guys develop processes for each step, so that way they can become experts, and then, you know, then from there, go from there. So it kind of passes down the line, like more like an assembly line production shop. It just really helps with output and consistency that way. So when I first started, we were, like I said, to go back to your original point, we were bouncing around. I would go to one department and maybe sand necks, and then another one maybe you know, sand bodies for buffing, then maybe help out in assembly. So everybody was kind of bouncing around, and what I found was it took too long to set up, because you're constantly having to reorganize and plan out your day every time you walked in, rather than going in and knowing exactly what you're going to do every day. And so I eventually convinced my bosses we're going to go to a system where this guy will work here, this guy will work here, this guy will work here, and then this department, and then they'll become experts at their departments. And then if we want to cross train from there, we will. But for now, we really need to focus on how we can increase output. So yeah, I was bouncing all over the place, basically doing different things. You know, and it's kind of like goes back to my background with Jackson Charvel. I started with fretwork, and then I got fast at fretwork, really good at getting my numbers in fretwork. I would go help out in the paint department. I started taping stuff off, paint prep, everything like that, to full on spraying, you know. So, and then from there, I went to the wood shop for a bit, and I was doing, you know, different duties within the wood shop. So I essentially kind of like moved through a master builder program without the, I guess, the title that you hear so often, you know, master builder, you know, and everything like that.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's really cool. Because you literally you were 19. You worked your way up that company.
Yeah, it was an awesome opportunity. And I told myself, I always, I'm going to get into final assembly. So I worked my way into final assembly eventually, and then ended up becoming the department supervisor for final assembly for Jackson Charvel. So that kind of takes you through my entire background, working through different departments, learning from all the masters within those departments, learning their techniques, being able to apply them. And, sometimes it's a while before I build or do anything. So when I go back to it, it's just like riding a bike, and I remember all those principles and all those skills that I learned back in the day.
That's so cool. I love that. Now, when you made your way to ESP, you kind of started putting some new protocols in place and to make sure that it was work coming through a little more efficiently. Was there any hands-on building that you did down there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So basically starting with in a production shop, basically you're working within a particular department. So you're performing particular skill, particular duties. So, I might have worked in the wood shop doing binding, or I might have worked in there doing sanding, shaping necks, working in the buffing department. I ended up going into the final assembly department because it was taking a real long time to get guitars through final assembly. So I brought some of my experience and the type of tools we would use, and kind of developing and defining a process for how we were going to do the final assembly on the guitars. So I ended up working my way into the final assembly department and taking that over. And really, what was taking maybe 3 or 4 days to get a guitar out the door, I was able to reduce down into, half a day to a day for a couple of guitars.
Wow. That is so cool. I like this is, I've heard some different stories and perspectives on how the guitar gets built and the process, and the day-to-day aspect, but it's like from a larger company like ESP, like you kind of, it's a different way of hearing it,
Yeah, I mean, as far as the ESP USA shop, it kind of took me back to my beginning with Jackson Charvel, because the shop was more set up like that. It was just a few guys, and it was more of a real small family vibe as opposed to a big factory. Because I worked in a factory of, I think at the time there was probably close to 800 people, maybe 700 people at the Fender factory, and everybody kind of gets lost in the shuffle, and they have their different. It's almost like a high school where you have your different cliques,
Yeah.
And but this shop that I'm in now, it's really small, and everybody, it's like a family vibe, and that's what we're trying to establish, that we're trying to build. With the best of the best guys working together, and just making it happen.
Oh wow, that's so cool. Now, is there any particular builds that you're like extremely proud about? This is one of my favorite ones, and and you want to go into a little detail with that?
I mean, there's so much creativity in that shop, and a lot of the cool stuff that's come out of there has really been the painter. I'm not going to take credit for what he's done, because he's worked hard to get to where he's come, but I definitely tried early on when I first started in the shop and the way things were. I tried to encourage him to take some more control and basically be creative, and giving him the freedom to be creative. And he would say, "Hey, do you think I should try to do this?" And I'd say, "Dude, go for it. Go for it." And so the more he was given that freedom, the more he was able to show what he can do. And so some of the cool builds that we've had come out of that shop are like color schemes that he's come up with. Something that I really love a lot, because I've always wanted to do it, is a copper top guitar with some oxidized copper. And that was probably one of my favorite builds as far as personally what I worked on,
that's awesome.
Putting out. Yeah. But there's been so many cool guitars. It's different in a production shop, because everybody has their spot and everybody has their duty. You're not like taking one guitar from start to finish 100% necessarily. Even if you look at some of the master built guitars at their companies, and not naming any other companies or anything, it's started by a person, but then there's so many other hands that are put onto one particular custom master built guitar that there's a team. There's always a team of people behind you making things happen.
That's awesome.
Unless you're into like unless you're in a like small boutique shop where you're a one-man builder doing everything yourself. In most companies, you're going to have different hands on that custom instrument.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, because as part of you're talking about as well, because your operations now, how was that transition from being out on the floor and helping with assemblies and painting and putting the guitars together and final productions? How is this shifting for you in that responsibility in that realm?
It's definitely a lot more responsibility because I'm the one that the bosses come to and ask about numbers, or thankfully I've been able to deliver everything I said would happen, how it would happen. So I'm fortunate on that. Challenges are always going to come up in production that you try to anticipate and have a contingency for, but it's inevitable that you're going to run into snags or anything, right now there's a big boom in guitar building, and every company is looking for help right now because orders have gone through the roof almost across the board within guitar manufacturing.
Oh yeah.
Manufacturing in general, there's major delays in all types of manufacturing right now because of the supply chain. So some of that stuff is a little bit more of a challenge, a little bit hard to calculate. But as far as me transitioning into that particular spot, it's a background that I've had. I've had a lot of in-depth training, business training, managing production, that it's more like second nature. I enjoy it. I enjoy trying to solve challenges, but I have a crew of great guys who are always like looking to improve. My woodshop supervisor, Gil, he's had a background as long as I have, and I brought him on. We actually worked together like probably my first year and a half with Jackson Charvel. He came on for a little bit of time and then ended up leaving and going to another company. But I brought him on a couple years ago now, and he's made some big changes to his wood shop, so it's really helped with production.
That's awesome. Now, when it comes because like I said, everyone's got like their holy grail too. Like some people go after that Les Paul Jr. or that 59. Yeah. Some people are after a certain guitar. Do you have a holy grail? Because I know you're more on the building side, but do you have a holy grail as a guitar player?
As far as a player, I love, like, I'll just like kind of give you like my take on certain guitars. Like I love Les Pauls. I know what they do. I know what they've done throughout history of music. Yeah. But for me, playing them, I don't enjoy playing them whatsoever. I don't really like the feel. So I'm more like a Strat player. Like a not necessarily a Strat, but an S style body.
Yeah.
Double cutaway, contours, arm cut, just something a little bit more. That's just what I kind of got into. Yeah. My first guitar was an Ibanez Roadstar 440. Oh wow. And it was a hum single, so it was set up like a Strat basically. Yeah. Really narrow neck. The neck was real narrow. Probably 42 millimeters, probably a little bit under actually, just feel wise. So it was a real easy, fast playing guitar. As far as holy grails, I kind of have the guitars that I love and want to play. I have my ESP. I have out of our shop. I actually had the opportunity to buy a it's an M1 Tunematic, so it's a string through. Yeah. Tunematic, and that thing is killer. One of my buddies makes pickups over at Rocket Pickups, Willie. Nice. And he made me a custom pickup for it, and I threw that thing in there, and it's like night and day difference as far as the sound. I just absolutely fell in love with it.
Well, that's awesome. By the way, if you can send me that picture, because when I post the video description, I'll split screen it with the normal logo I use, and I'll have that picture of the guitar for you.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be awesome.
Yeah, I got some pictures of it, but it's you know, I'm really proud of the guitars. You know, I can name a bunch of different guitars. I mean, just aside from my professional you know, role or anything, I really love the JS. I love Joe Satriani models.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, so if there's one guitar that I'll actually buy and love to have is a JS model.
Nice. That is so
He was
cool.
one of my favorite players.
It's a great guitar. It's very lightweight, and you still get a massive tone out of it.
Right.
You know? Like that.
Yeah.
That's one of those guitars in the like late 80s, early 90s, where it kind of reshaped the perception of, well, it has to be a fully solid piece of wood for it to resonate and to still have that full sound. And then comes this like paper thin, you can literally carry it around with one hand, Joe Satriani model, and it's like it kind of reshaped that perception.
Yeah, it totally, because I mean that body, you know, a lot of people want to dog on basswood, but basswood, I actually made a body out of basswood, and for one of my personal builds at home, you know, and I don't build a lot like that because I work for a guitar company.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of companies frown on people making guitars. I definitely don't make anything to sell, but every once in a while, if I want to make something, it's for me, you know. And that basswood body is incredible. It's light. It sounds really good. It resonates. You know, it's killer with the Floyd for sure.
Oh, nice.
Holy Grail guitars, though, I would say a JS, because really, you know, I'm fortunate. I work in this industry to where I've had the opportunity to either build my own guitars. You know, I have a couple Jacksons. I have my ESP. You know, I make anything play the way I want it to, basically, because of my skill set. That I don't really have like a holy grail other than that JS, and I know that's not really unattainable, like a you know, like a 50s Les Paul or anything like that. But you know, it's not like a 59 or anything, but
it may be the case, but it's still a great guitar, and it's something that you're pursuing. So yeah, I'm counting it out as the holy grail for you, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's killer. I mean, that body shape, everything about it is like is incredible, you know. And also too, I like a slightly narrower nut width, like, you know, 42 millimeters at least. You know, it just depends on neck shape too, but I really love the way Joe Satriani is they're you know, a 42 millimeter nut, you know.
Yeah. Now when you're talking about neck shapes, are you saying like V shapes, D shapes, C shapes, or U shapes, or?
Yeah, I prefer more like a D, kind of like a flat, thin D. I know the wizard necks that they don't feel like that.
Yeah.
So it's a whole different thing. But as far as the way my personal favorite neck shapes, they're a little bit flatter on the back. They have a little bit more shoulder to them. So I would consider that more like a flat D, like a thin D.
Like a thin D. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. You know, a little flatter, not around like a U, like ESP necks, or like a thin U.
Yeah.
Most of the necks we're doing out of the shop. You know, mine's a little bit more flatness to the back.
Nice.
Yeah.
Greg, where can everyone find you? Is there anything you want to plug or promote? Like, I know you have a YouTube channel.
Yeah, I have my YouTube channel. It's Greg the Guitar Guy. I'm surprised that name wasn't taken already. I just, you know, but yeah, Greg the Guitar Guy on YouTube, and then my Instagram is that guy Gregorio. That was a nickname I had. A lot of Spanish speaking people I worked with would call me Gregorio. You know, so Spanish for Gregory. Yeah, that's where that came from.
I love it, man. It's like, that is so cool.
A lot of my friends. Yeah. And I think that's pretty much it. I don't really have much else. I'm not really active on Facebook too much anymore. I still have it. I haven't, you know, deleted my account or anything like that. I'm not on there very often. I was finding that sometimes social media was taking way too much of my time and trying to keep up with everything. So I just like to post pictures every once in a while. You know, a lot of people are finding me through word of mouth, so I still do a lot of repairs on the side for people.
Nice.
I recently had a motorcycle accident a few weeks ago, so I'm not doing too much right now with my hand. My hand's still recovering.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, Instagram and YouTube, and even then, I'm not super active on social media, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's like hit or miss.
Yeah. And
I'll have periods where
I'll have links to those to both your YouTube and Instagram in the pages below.
Okay.
As well. Yeah. So
yeah, on my Instagram, you'll see pictures like, back in the day when I first started with Jackson Charvel, way down the line,
Yep.
some pictures like that, or some of the builds that I've had throughout my years and stuff like that.
And I got to tell you, I love your Instagram page because it's like, it gives me like, it's all these different ESP guitars, and I'm like, I love it because you're able to see all these different builds, and and then meeting somebody who's a part of those builds is really cool.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I know like certain people, they have a real strict theme they stick with on their Instagram and stuff, but I'm kind of like throwing up a little bit of different things here and there and everything. Some of the Instagram profiles, you see one picture to the next, it's so uniform and it looks just like it's completely streamlined, like same picture pose and everything. But mine's a little bit random, but I'm just throwing up there whatever it's interesting to me at that day.
That's awesome, man. And again, I want to thank you for making the time for me. I know you were on vacation this week and out there in California. So I appreciate you making the time. And again, for everybody who wants to learn more about Greg's builds, follow him on his Instagram and the links below. And you do a little like hands-on tutorial stuff on your YouTube video, I noticed, and like a little more informational stuff. So if you want to learn more about Greg's style of building, visit his YouTube channel as well. Greg, thank you so much for making the time again, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate being here. Thank you. Thanks so much. I was really honored to be here today.
I'm honored that you took the time, man. I love it. This was fantastic, and I'm looking forward to talking to you again in the near future.
Hey, anytime. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Wonderful. And thank you guys for tuning in tonight to this episode of Alex Lopez Talks. Be light and love, everybody.